voice of the customer programs. Put in the chat if you have an idea of what it is, or if you've never heard of this before, or you've heard of it but don't know what it is. Like, what do you think voice of the customer is? Any thoughts on it? What do you got? And see people typing away. All right, Cynthia. So you've just launched your first one. You got someone else who says pretty green. It's okay. You can admit if you know something or know nothing. It's all okay.
Kimberly, spot on. Yep. It is.
You're
not alone.
Yep. All of those kinds of things, right? Okay, good. And what I've seen too, because as you know, part of what I've done with consulting at Success League is I've been interim VP in a number of different startups. And what I've seen is that whether it's customer advocacy or voice of the customer, that it's sort of like, oh, well, that's too much for us. We'll do that later. And you're really missing the opportunity to incorporate even small things in the beginning to utilize it to your best practice and to encourage best practice. So I figured it would be good to sort of dig into this a little bit, because you don't have to do all of it, everything. You can do parts of it. So in terms of the traditional marketing definition versus modern usage, Dana, do you want to maybe kick this off and I'll chime in?
Yes. So when we were putting this together, when we were talking about kind of traditional marketing definition of voice of customer versus that modern, I say sometimes the old way versus the future. That old way is all about kind of just those static survey responses, and they're just there because someone said, oh, we need to be doing a survey response. Kind of the more modern usage, and where a lot of, especially where the role of customer marketing has flourished with the help of customer success with these programs, is it's built into being a two-way exchange of value, where it's tied to strategic growth initiatives. You're actually putting the feedback and the actual authentic voice of your customers, not just, you can do great things with a text response or a quote, but the authentic voice, their real live voice, audio or video, putting it to work and tying it back to those initiatives has been more of a way. And what everyone's putting in here of the ideas, it all falls into there. It's everything. It's wherever your customers are speaking on your behalf of good or bad things, product feedback, not product feedback, all of that.
And yeah, I know, Christine, I have slides. I've taken to adding slides to the beginning of this. But in terms of the traditional, so like if anybody has seen like, oh, we have an NPS, send out an NPS, right? You've seen me post recently, and we do have resources here at the end where I'm posting about NPS or product market fit surveys, things like that. A lot of times what will happen is the board will say, well, to the CEO, well, what's your NPS score? And then the CEO will say to marketing or to CS, well, what's our NPS score? And then they'll be like, oh, okay, well, we'll send out a survey. And then they'll get a survey back and like, oh, our NPS score is X. And I was like, okay, well, we should improve it from there, or, whatever. Like it has no real purpose in the end, but to report back to the board, we have this NPS score. Right. And that's really kind of what we were talking about with that traditional marketing definition. Like you send it out, you get this feedback, you do nothing with it, but maybe report it. Or you say in your marketing materials, we have this NPS score because you're actually proud of it. But what does that do for you? Making these, whether it's surveys or your voice of the customer, work for you and work towards your best practices is actually something that is actually not just kind of what you can do in the future, but you can actually do that now. And that's why we're calling it modern usage, not just future usage. This is something that Dana put together. Why don't you walk us through this a little bit, and that way we can start to kind of get into the different types of tactics that you can use. And then Christine, we'll have you come up too, because I know you were talking about community and some other things.
Oh yeah, Christine, spot on. Community falls into there. We didn't catch that on that slide. I just feel communities, even the whole umbrella of the full
Right.
customer experience aspect of it. But yeah, I mean, you have so many opportunities for different customer touch points. I mean, this is just one example of a couple parts, especially where when I happen to be talking to teams that want to partner better with a support team or with their customer success team, we're able to get them to see kind of where those major milestones within the customer touch points where customer voice can be captured. And that's in all those various formats. You could get it in text, audio, video. So this, and then even deeper into here is, I mean, one of these bullet points here, attending an event. I mean, some of these end up being no-brainers, but they're not always done because customer voice sometimes, not to dig on marketing, but it has that marketing lens and it has that one use case maybe. But when it's brought into the customer facing roles and people are dealing with the customers, you have that better relationship and you're more able to get a little bit better insights than maybe just a 9 on an NPS that they hand back. But you could give a call and capture why did they give that 9 and get a great snippet or a great quote from them, or attend an event and talk to them more.
So let me just back up a second and kind of just when you're looking at key moments in a customer journey and there's something that a customer has experienced and you know you need them to achieve something. Let's say it's onboarding, right? So maybe you have a complex onboarding. Maybe it's several phases. Maybe it takes 6 months. To wait for 6 months and not hear about how the customer feels about the onboarding process is a long time. So you might then want to check in and do some surveys or get some customer feedback by talking to them specifically, asking them feedback questions during that process. Now, there's other times onboarding is like, I remember talking to a CEO who said that if his onboarding wasn't finished in 20 minutes, then something had gone wrong. That's a very quick onboarding process, right? But you might still want feedback from the customer or to ensure that they're going to move on and do the next stage, adoption. So it can vary in terms of like what these phases are. It could be, say, in the adoption phase, there are certain things you want to know, or when support. Has anybody heard of like CSAT? Has anyone heard of CSAT? So what does CSAT stand for? Somebody want to?
Customer satisfaction?
Exactly. And so customer satisfaction questions and all of these things, whether like NPS, if NPS is a specific question, and I have in the resources some links that I have for LinkedIn posts where I share like what the actual NPS question is. The NPS question is, would you recommend our product to a friend, family member, or colleague, right? And that is because NPS was designed for B2C, for like sneakers and that sort of thing. Because if you're willing to tell grandma to go out and buy those Nikes, right? They know they've got everything. They've got the market sewn up, right? So they want to know if you're going to tell anybody and everybody. Whereas if you looked at, say, a product market fit question, that's are we a must have? What would you do if you couldn't use our product? That's a different question. That's why it has a different name. All these different kinds of things. Customer satisfaction is usually a 1 to 5 scale, right? NPS is usually 1 to 10. Right? There are different ways. So you can Google these. You can read quickly, like, on any article about like how it's scored and why it's scored that way. Product market fit, you should try to have at least 40% of your customers with the, must have in that must have bucket, right? So there's different reasons why, just out of when they've tested these types of questions over and over again, where you want to fit and how you calculate these numbers. And there's different times you might use it. Customer effort score. That's something that you might use to understand the level of effort that a customer is having to put towards either going through onboarding or through support or looking things up in your knowledge management system? What level of effort is it that they perceive that they're having to go through to use your product, to get to your product, to get to your support team, things like that, right? So there's all these different things you might use at different points in the journey, but they will only really use them if they know that it's going to have a positive impact, that there's a reason. Like, how many surveys do you get a day? Probably at
A
least
lot.
one. Yeah.
I
3,
get like 5.
5. Yeah. It's like, that's pretty often when you think about that. If you got even one survey a day, 365 days of the year, that's a lot of surveys. Even if they take 3 minutes to put up, to fill in, are you going to do that every single day? Which surveys do you fill out? When do you fill out surveys?
I'm
Yeah,
really,
from
really
bad
happy, or I'm really,
experience.
really not.
Yeah.
Okay.
None of the middle of the
wants to-
road.
Betsy, what were you gonna say?
But I'm really, really happy, or I'm really, really not, but never middle of the road.
Okay. And do you feel
Yeah.
do you feel like you're going to have an impact?
I'm optimistic enough to hope so.
But you don't know because no one's actually followed up with you, huh?
Rarely. I guess it's happened over the years a couple of times, and I've been shocked when it happened.
Right. That's not very common, but that is actually best practice. If your customers know that when you're eliciting feedback, whether it's through one-on-one and you're gathering the feedback from them, like how many folks who are CSMs today or have been CSMs in the past who will get feedback from their customer about the product, and you go and tell product about it, and then the customer is asking you, okay, what happened? Yeah.
Hmm.
What
Or-
if you had a way to share back with them, this is what's going to happen? What happens then when you're building that relationship with the customer, right? So all of these things are ways to bring in the voice of the customer. What other, Dana, what else? Oh, wait, Christine, I'll go over to you for a second. You were also talking about community, right?
Right, because a community is a good way to get discussion and voice of the customer amongst customers themselves, in addition to back and forth with things like product, right? So, right, like the
Yeah.
issue, right, that you just talked about was, we called it the black hole of product, right? Somebody makes a request, a CSM sends an email or a Slack message to their favorite product person and goes, customer ABC would really like to see this, or they logged a ticket about this 8 months ago and we haven't heard anything. And so, community can be a place where you can keep track of that, right? You can actually launch ideas. You can structure it so that people know what the ideas are. It's more transparent than, putting it in a Jira or site that nobody else can see but the 12 people on the product team.
Awesome.
So that's part of it. And then just the back and forth in communication that you can get with other people within the organization. Like, I just had some people from our implementation team today say, oh my gosh, there's so much cool stuff here. Because they didn't know, they hadn't been in a while, and they didn't know that they could see people talking about these things. And
right. And there is a difference. So like surveys can give you like the numbers, right? Can kind of back you up that it's not just anecdotes. But then the anecdotes are really powerful because those are the customer stories. So when you're thinking about how to gather in all of this information, you want to think about both the numbers and the stories. But then also you want to think about, what are your business goals? What are your goals in your CS program? What kinds of things might you need to look at in terms of customer friction, right? And things you might want to improve, right? And so any of those kinds of things, if you have a voice of the customer program that is linked to your company goals, your CS program goals, or places in your customer journey where you're trying to eliminate friction. Do you know what I mean by friction? Who knows what I mean by friction? Someone else translate customer friction for me. What does that mean?
Bumps in the road.
What else? Bump in the road is what?
I think it's whatever might create inefficiencies, difficulties, confusion, basically the inverse of a seamless user experience.
Great. Okay, good. So hopefully then, so anything that you're trying to smoothen out in the customer journey process, then if you can, if instead you get feedback on it and you know what you need to fix, these things can then help have an impact on your program. It gives you that clear idea of where you might want to go and fix, right? And without it, you're sort of like, maybe this is what I ought to fix, but you can actually get this feedback directly from the customer. That's what these things can empower you to do. Okay, so we're going to go into breakout groups and discuss this. Going to do small groups of like, 3 or 4. There's a couple of different sets of questions. You can look at these about surveys, or you can look at kinds of questions you might do around feedback. But this gives you an idea of like what you might sort of journey through. Take a look at the number of the group that you're in. Be sure to write down the names and any sort of notes that you want to share with others, okay? And then I will, and you have this link right over in the chat. Somebody put that in the chat. It's also the link to this, this form is in the Slack group as well for today. So I'm going to break out somewhere. I'm going to do the breakout rooms. And we're going to go away for about 15 minutes. All right. So how did that go? I saw a lot of notes being taken. Were there any sort of like big, aha moments here, or what's something that we can share with the rest of the folks? Is there somebody who wants to offer something up? Can I call on somebody then? Is that all right?
We talked a lot about ideation and closing the loop with product. That was the big focus for us.
Yeah, that's funny. Tim joined and we were talking about product too. What tell us more about what your discussion was around product.
Well, it was that black hole thing that we were talking about before, and how we need to give our customers closure on items, just so that they can get on with their life, right? They still have that goal. It still has to get done. That outcome is something that they're still looking for, whether it's with our product or not. And just by saying, you know what, it's not going to make our roadmap this year, that's enough, right? That tells me as the customer that you respect my time. And I can now go on and find a solution that's going to work to get, because that goal is going to still be there for me in December, just as it was in January. And if you tell me in November that you can't do it, I'm going to be very upset with you. Right? Versus if you tell me in March that, we've looked at it, it's just not going to make the roadmap in a timely fashion enough for you, whether it makes it at all, right? That's fine. That's enough information for me to go out and get it done. And if it comes up later, yay. If not, I'm good, because I got it finished. All right. I got my goal accomplished. I got to check the box in my to-do list. And so that was one of our discussions, was just around all of the tools that we can use to get at those pieces of information, and how we don't really like NPS.
We definitely kicked the can around, and also to Jan, your post, I loved, because you talked about the people that don't respond, because that got me thinking so much, because we're about to kick off our NPS next month, and it's sort of like I'm trying to make it as effective, but from what I could tell, there's no flip-in plan in terms of proactively informing customers and definitely closing the freaking loop, other than like the ones who, what I've seen in the past year is like people who like score us low. We're all over those, but everyone else, is like not really addressed. And definitely the people who don't respond are not addressed. And that to me, Christine and I were just talking about that, was like, those are the ones, well, why aren't they responding? Because they don't think anything positive is going to come out of that survey. They're not going to waste their time when no loop's going to be closed and nothing positive for them is going to come out of it. So I think it's a good point to track those people who don't respond at all too.
Yeah. And if you read Greg Danes and all of his churn analysis, he's got the data to prove that the ones who don't respond are a much, much higher churn risk than the ones who give you negative responses. Because the ones who are giving you negative responses are the ones who want better from you. They're still engaged. The ones who are not responding, they're gone. You can write them off. They're done.
By and large, that can be the case. Just a couple things I wanted to just mention. So when Tim and I were talking, and then Christine, it reminded me too, if you're talking to the customer, and it's a one-on-one and you're getting product feedback, really critical to ask them what the business impact is. And if they're one of those customers that's giving you a long list of all these things, have them prioritize. Find out what is the business impact of these things. And if you could choose one, if you could choose three, have them do the Sophie's Choice a little bit, right? If that's going to have a horrible reference, but if you had to choose, what would you choose, right? That sort of thing, right? And then what you're talking about, Cynthia, like red flag if you're not letting the customer know, because first of all, which email box is that going into? It might go into spam. It might go into, I don't know if other people have like the Gmail where like there's the updates or promotions and things like that. Like it could go anywhere. They may not even be looking for it. And they might want to if they knew you were going to do something with it. If they knew you were going to do something with that feedback. And then earlier today, I don't know if he's still here, but Steve Bernstein's here. He has a product that actually helps you track not just the detractors, but who's actually not even, responding, right? And so that's another thing too. How are you going to track who isn't responding? Because those are your black hole customers that you need to get them back into the fold, or they might be missing for good. And Tim, what were you going to say?
Yeah, just to add to that, the question that I ask when I'm in a call with a client and they're giving me feedback on a feature request, I try to unpack it by asking, what problem is this going to solve? And is it going to save time, money, budget, easier to use? This way you can kind of build that back and go back to the product team when you have your feature request reviews, because you're kind of fighting for the customer, right? Also, another best practice is just hop on a call with them and do a screen recording, 2 to 3 minutes, whether it's like Loom or Vidyard, whatever you want to use. And that actually paints a lot of stories, or paints the picture. If you get that data and you can actually download it and share it with the product team, like, here's where it's coming from X client, here's their name, here's the date. This is exactly what they want to look at. This way we can go back and track it. So the more information, the better. Because have you ever been in that situation where here's the product request, but then, okay, we need a little more information. Can you go back? And the more that you can capture early and often, I think you'll get a quicker outcome. That's been successful for me. I was just curious to see what everybody else, if anybody else tried that best practice.
I agree with you, Tim. I just put in the chat, I do something similar in a form where they'll tell me about an enhancement. And I'll say, fill out the form. So it's documented, it's tied back to HubSpot. And I say, how will this make you a rock star? Like, how is this going to make your role better? And it's a mandatory question in the form. They can't submit without it.
I love it.
So,
how are you going to be a rock star? I like that.
Yeah. Well, my advocates are called rock stars. So it comes in together. But yeah, so it helps, and making it a mandatory field, like that, then that makes them think like, do I really need this? Is it a nice to have? Will it impact my role in this way? So that's something I've done in the last 6 months, and it's helped, and we've gotten less, but more quality in requests.
Right. So, and we're finding the same thing too, Dana. We're finding that now that we formalize the process, that we're getting a lot more solid feedback from people about use case in particular.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Love that.
I also just copied into the Slack chat Rashid's suggestion. If they have $100, kind of buy a feature exercise. If they have $100, what are they going to buy? Where do they put that $100? Right? I think that's a lovely thing. Well, not necessarily $100, but you know what I mean? Like the idea of having them prioritize, and that's probably a better way to put it than Sophie's choice. So buy a feature exercise. Kathy, you had your hand up. What were you going to?
Oh, I started typing in the chat. We're talking a little bit ago about giving customers bad news or good news, but you tell them. I deliver that kind of stuff depending on how big your business is. I try to do that with a phone call. I think it helps the relationship when the customer, anytime you get back to somebody, that's like, yay, they got back to me, because people don't. So it's nice to do a phone call, especially if it's bad news. And then you can listen to the customer, like talk about how they feel about that. And
Well, or there might be some workarounds that you can suggest, or
Sure.
you know, other alternatives, or maybe that's where you really find out if that's a really, you know, deal breaker, you know, for them too.
right. Yeah, if product can't do it this year and it's like work stopping emergency, we got a new client, we have to have this. I don't know if that makes a difference. If I know it's a bad idea for product to go off the roadmap, but if you want to keep a client, I don't know.
Yeah, and sometimes what happens too is, okay, if we're gonna approve this request, what are we gonna take away?
Yeah, there's limited resources.
Yeah.
So, and that's the other reason too, where you really want to think about the feedback that you're eliciting. How does that relate to like your North Star or your OKRs for your business overall, right? How important is that blue button? How important is it like that you're working on smoothing the adoption process and the friction that might be in the adoption phase for your customers, right? How does that impact expansion, renewals? And that's another way to help you weigh, you know, how you're spending your time as well. We all have limited resources, right? So when you think about then, how many surveys are you sending out? Because that's a limited, you know, resource that what you can ask for from your customers, right? Can you get them excited about wanting to fill out a survey? Is that something that they can actually get excited about, you know, or giving you feedback, you know, whatever it may be?
Well, and I think too, we have to keep track of the touch points in general with the customer, because if you're asking for a survey and then product set out a survey, and then I did in my customer marketing, sent out a case study request or a reference request. And if if all 12 of us are trying to touch that client in the same week, that's just bad planning.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know that there are some companies that they try to limit sort of emails that are coming from the company to the customer to 4 per month, 4. And that's across the company. So anything from marketing, anything from CS. Now that doesn't include like if a CSM is working directly with the customer, but like in terms of like those general emails. And so then what they would do is they would really try to focus. If I'm going to reach out and get, you know, feedback from these customers, is it, you know, just the ones who are in onboarding? Or is it, you know, am I just going to invite, you know, this group of people to CS office hours kind of thing, right? Like you, or not CS office hours, sorry, but office hours that you might hold as a one-to-many sort of thing. Sorry. I didn't say that without thinking, but you know what I mean? So that those are some options and some things to think about too. Dana, was there anything that we haven't hit yet that you consider best practices?
No, I was just chiming off of what Christine mentioned of not only tracking what your customers have done for you so you don't burn them out or overuse them, but capturing what they actually want to do for you. I mean, that's where I deliver and create like ongoing customer voice program. You formalize it, you invite them, Slap 5 rock stars. That's the rock star name. What do you want to do with us? Do you want to speak on webinars? Would you like to network with peers? You want to be a reference call? Do you want to do case studies? Do you want to do customer success story? And they tell you yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. So then when you need the ask for the feedback for product or customer story, you know who to go to because you know who wants to do, and everyone wants to do different things. In our breakout, I was mentioning, I have a customer who I'm friends with her on Instagram, Facebook. We're great friends. She will not get on video to do a customer video story with me. Like, it's just in her personal life and professional life are two different wavelengths. So I get other feedback and voice of customer from her. So it's meeting your customers where they're at.
Well, we're using product access as a win through the references. So once they get so many credits in references and referrals, they get to sit on the product advisory board.
Nice.
So this is part of what we're sort of bleeding into is customer advocacy, right? Because it is related in terms of if you're getting feedback, certainly if you're getting positive feedback from your customers, then you want to take that and turn them into customer advocates, right? And so you want to, relate that. But then there's also, what do you do whether it's good feedback or negative areas that needs to improve feedback? What do you do to then turn it around to improve your product or improve your processes, right? And when you're improving those processes, then what impact does that have on your ability to, sell in expansions or to renew the customer, right? And all of these things, when you're looking at this, you want to think about how you can measure it. Measure the impact of doing these programs, measure the impact of the feedback that you have on these improvements, and how you share that internally and how you share that externally. If you can tell your customers, we got this much feedback and it helped us improve the following things. I've seen companies where they'll do webinars and say, you gave us this feedback. I'll do like a big survey or something like that. Like, you gave us this feedback. This is what we heard from you. This is what we're doing with it. And they do even quarterly updates, and that sort of things. That incentivizes people to participate in that and to give that feedback. So when you incorporate it into sort of your DNA and you let them know they're going to have an impact, that is a different type of relationship to the survey and to your customer that you have now. Right? So that gives you different opportunities with it. Tim, you had your hand up a second ago. What were you thinking about?
Yeah, I was just curious about tracking all those emails from marketing, whether it's outreach, regarding just the cadence. So for example, if you're going to reach a client for a QBR, for example, do you all have that ability in your CRM to track those emails that other departments are sending, or are those turned off? Just if you could drop it in the chat. I'm going through that right now and curious to see if sometimes you can turn it on or off. But my take is, as a CSM, I want to know exactly that last touch point that someone has contacted the client, whether it's service or marketing, because you want to go in and you can actually leverage that. Like, hey, how's it going? I noticed that ticket is still open. We're on it. And then kind of pivot to the next topic.
Yeah, that's a good reason to have a CS tool that can kind of bring in all of those different touch points, and you can kind of see it and you have an idea of how they're interacting with your company. There's also some what they call customer intelligence tools, or when they're using AI for CS, that can help you gather all that information across the board, across your company, and you can see all those different touch points as well. So all of those things can be tools and that help you kind of be smarter with your company, with your customers, between your company and customers. All right, let's we'll get Kathy, and then we're over time, so we'll do Kathy, and then we'll close up here.
I'm just wondering if there could be some sort of meeting between department heads. They'd never do this, but if somebody's sending out, one department sending out one thing, like marketing, and then product sending out another thing, I mean, do those guys talk? Do they make sure that that they're aligned on what's happening? Or like customer marketing and customer success, that would be a place to really keep talking to each other, because you could be doing double contacting the customer and
Yeah.
yeah.
Some companies
how
are
do
better
you-
at that than others, right? I've certainly seen like at some companies where they'll coordinate, they'll have a Slack channel where they coordinate. And they'll make certain they get approvals from all these different groups, you know, and they plan it out in advance. You know, they know how many, you know, they track how many are going out. There are other companies that maybe aren't as close to communicating across all the different groups. And then, you know, they'll certainly hear back from the customers when that's the case.
I mean, do those things tend to be sort of an administrative like tangle, or is there a way to, you know, everybody keep in touch that just sort of works?
We're seeing it's pretty easy, Kathy. We've got everybody coming together monthly to talk about it, but then we have also built a Monday board with a schedule of all of the communications that are going to customers, and
Wow.
everybody, then we can bundle things together so that we're still trying to keep the fewer is better rule
Makes sense.
and control who sends it. So if unless it's truly a CS specific activity, in which case we'll use the proper tool and have it come from their
Oh my
CSM
God.
directly, then it probably comes from me if it's going to customers.
Nice.
Dana, have you seen any other best practices along this? Not so much.
No, not really. I was just putting in what I mentioned earlier, chiming back and forth with Tim now about HubSpot. We should definitely connect on what you're doing with your emails and whatnot, because I use
Well,
HubSpot as my CS tool. So
Yeah, likewise.
okay, cool. We'll definitely
Excellent.
have to connect.
What is the topic you're using HubSpot to track?
That's my CS tool, HubSpot. So I have mandatory, everyone that's emailing customers need to have the integration with Gmail. We use Gmail Shop and HubSpot. So I can see all of the emails that have gone out, what the responses are. And this is new. This is like within the last 6 months, primarily HubSpot was just sales. And I'm like, why am I not using this? So we have an onboarding tool in there. We have HubSpot is just uncovered a lot for me in the last 6 months.
And health scores too.
Yeah. And there are different automations and workflows.
You can trigger tons of stuff in there.
Yeah. I'm blown away that it took me so long. So yeah, I'm late to the game, but we've done a lot in the last 6 months with it. So
awesome. All right. Well, look, I hope that you had some takeaways from today and you found some things that are valuable in today's session. We have all the notes over here in the Slack chat. People took some amazing notes in all the different sessions. So you may want to look at the notes, and then also in the slides, there's a link there. We also have a resources page. It includes a number of different articles around a new version of NPS, which is really interesting. That's an HBR article. I've written a couple posts. Dana has an ebook that you may want to check out about having, kind of making your CS programs a revenue driver, and some other ebooks. And then I also contributed to this new thing called a LinkedIn AI article. It's sort of, I forget what they're called, but anyway, and it's specifically about this topic that I just added to that last week. So there's a lot of people are posting and thinking about this. I encourage you to go and contribute on LinkedIn and exchange more ideas, and come to our Slack channel and continue to exchange ideas here. If you come across other resources, I saw that Kimberly added a couple articles over in this Slack chat, things about product market fit surveys. So, use it as a resource, use each other as a resource. Hope we're helping you here today.
Which channel is everything you just talked about? Because I got your Slack open.
CS Office Hours, Reflection, and Ideas. And I promise I'll come up with something shorter, maybe just CS Office Hours chat or something. But anyway, that's the one. CS Office Hours, Reflection, and Ideas. All right. Awesome. So great to see everybody here today. And take a look in our LinkedIn channel for what's coming up next week and the following weeks. We have a lot of great topics coming up. All right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Have a
Good night, guys.
music,
You
like
have a good
closing
one.
music.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Success Hour, formerly known as CS Office Hours. We regularly put out new content, so to be the first to know, like this episode, tap that notification bell, hit that subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you soon.